to the November 11th City of Tualatin work session. Tonight we have a few items on our agenda, and we're going to lead off tonight with our acknowledgement of native land and people. And I know Beth spent a significant amount of time on this, so welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I don't know if it's me sharing my slides or if I have the opportunity to do that, or if that's something that someone on someone else's end is doing.
I think it's you if you're comfortable doing that. I think
Happy
we
to
have
do
them
so.
loaded if you want us to.
Yep, no, I got it. I just want to,
Okay.
I will try to share screen here. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see it? Thank you. All right. Well, again, thank you for having me. Before I get started, I wanted to do a recognition of some important folks who helped aid in the process and were essential to the work that we're presenting here tonight. I'd like to recognize Emma Gray, Mason Hall, Parker Johnson, Kaya Gill, Megan George, Valerie Pratt, Nicholas Schiller, Ross Baker, Betsy Roof, Pedro Marquez, Stephanie Littleberg Fogel, Dr. David Lewis, and Christina Barboza. All of those are stakeholders and people who were part of their process and want to make sure that they get their due credit for their hard work. As one of the contextual reminders of why we're here, U.S. Department of Arts and Culture put out a call for all individuals and organizations to open public events and gatherings with an acknowledgement of the traditional native inhabitants of the land. And that got a lot of things started. I'm sharing this slide and this concept with you this evening because the reality of the types of this type of work and the types of conversations, albeit very important, that come from it, can sometimes also be uncomfortable. And with that discomfort can sometimes trigger a very natural human response to have your confirmation bias kind of flare up and feel resistance. And so I just, not to teach or to tell any of you how you need to show up for this evening's conversation, but just to invite you from the blue zone into the green, where we can do some learning and some growth together, and to just be mindful and to care for yourselves as you if you find yourself in the red zone, and make sure you take the care that you need. As I said, it's a very natural human space to have this feel uncomfortable, and also the discomfort is sometimes where some of the best things happen. So thank you for the opportunity to do that. I know that you know what you asked us to do, but just as a reminder, since I know you're all very busy people, back on March 22nd of this year, you charged myself as the chair from T Park to form a work group that was both careful and collaborative and included committee members, and that had voices from our Indigenous community members. And you asked that work group to provide you with 4 things. We were able to achieve 3 of them as I'll call home runs, and 1 that's in progress. We have provided for you, and we'll get to this evening, the written statement, an acknowledgement statement, and as well as some accompanying protocols for its use. And then some additional feedback and suggestions for where we'd like to see this work, where we see based on our research where this work can go. I'd say that we've opened the door to a deepened relationship with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, but I certainly wouldn't, I don't think that that's ever a bullet point that gets checked fully from my perspective. You also, as you had mentioned to me in the charge, and just to remind us in terms of context building for this evening, that this work is really connected to your vision statement to be an inclusive community, promoting equity, diversity, and access, and creating a meaningful quality of life for everyone in our community. And it's as well connected to and tied to the Parks and Recreation, Equity and Inclusion Plan, the second of the goals there. So that was your ask to us in our work. Our representation here tonight is, and our ask of you is for your thoughtful, as I'm sure you will give, listening and consideration, some dialogue and discussion about whether or not we move forward with this as a resolution or a recommendation, and then some next steps, hopefully finding an electronic space for a capturing of this good work done by your city members and community members, as well as creating some sort of standing committee or continuing group that carries on some of the next steps that we've found in our work to be really essential to this work. little context on the work group. Over 5 months after March 22nd came, I started on the recruitment trail and I was recruiting from the city committees as well as a few other important organizations. I reached out to 12 groups and 11 of those groups were represented in some way or another within our work. Just one group abstained from involvement, and that group was navigating some challenges and changes through the pandemic in terms of their leadership, their structure, their meetings. So it just didn't seem like the right time for anyone from that group. But 7 of the groups were included in the week over week or meeting over meeting drafting process. And 4 of those groups served in an advisory or input capacity, either because of the way in which our relationship developed over time or what the capacity of the folks within those groups had. All of our meetings were public meetings, and those were 6 meetings that we held over the course of 4 months. And collectively, this work group, I'm just so incredibly impressed by them. Our work represents about 150 at least hours of labor by these unelected, unpaid members of your community. So this is but very much definitely a work of heart. The work that we did, I'll reference now. I've included for you, you should all have the packet of information in addition to these slides. The work that we did includes a number of resources, both that I had curated prior to the work group starting, as well as throughout our process, both myself and other members of the group. So pages 6 through 9 of the resource list, or is the resource list in your addended packet. And those are some amazing research and pieces that really informed what we did. In terms of organization, I'm an administrator and organizer by heart, so I feel the need to share this with you, that we started at the core of why are we doing this work and why is it important, and worked outward from that core to how then would we make an impact with this why statement at our core. And then the final work was in creating the actual acknowledgement statement. And you'll see tonight's presentation to you as well as based in that same structure. Our work was incredibly collaborative, and as all good writing is, very iterative. It changed over time, and it was really based in that iterations, it was based on community outreach and feedback. So the 2 critical points in our process, both after we drafted the purpose statement and after we drafted the acknowledgement statement, we sought and took extra time in between meetings, got community feedback, and then brought that in to inform our process and let it change and develop. And within this work, we also were reaching out to our community members, but also seeking to have people reach to you and tell you that they were supportive of this. So hopefully you have been receiving and will continue to receive messages of support from those folks with whom we made contact. I'd like to direct you as well to Appendices 10 and 11. Those are on pages 44 and 45. Just gives you a bit of structure in terms of knowledge of what that work group process was, really the places that give you a sense of what the system or our procedure was. And then in Appendix 11, or Appendix, my apologies, 11, I just created a visual representation of, because I think sometimes that the process of where this has come from and where we are now is an important one to be aware of. I'll give a quick overview, especially for anyone who's not looking at the packet. This started from the context that was brought to my attention in 2017 with Oregon Senate Bill 13, where the Native history and shared history curriculum was changed. It was developed and adapted so that we in the K-12 curriculums were teaching more accurate and honest history about our shared history with the Native Americans. In summer 2020, a community member came to me and said, hey, I think this is something we should be doing. I see you as a leader in the community. What can we do? I worked with T-Park, as you're well aware. T-Park brought this idea to you, and we all know where it came from there. I think as an important note, and you'll see in the appendix, our learning throughout the process of this, as soon as we created the work group, it evolved, and we found that perhaps where we had started as, hey, a land acknowledgement's a good idea, we should do that. And what we learned about it, and not that it's not still a good idea, but some of the other things that we found are implicit or important to go with that really evolved, and we grew in our understanding throughout the process. So that's important. I hope you'll also note in that appendix and that graphic that November 2021, where we are today, is right in the middle. The hope is that this work is really still step 0 in the process. And so that brings me to some of the key findings. I know that we're here to talk about the acknowledgement, but I think understanding the process and the learning is equally as important. So one of the key takeaways as we worked in research and learning from Native community members is that really the work of creating and presenting a land acknowledgement is the work of the perceived majority people to do. And with that, when we have to include Native voices. A mantra that rang through in much of the reading and research I did was not for us without us. But with that, it's the need to appropriately compensate Native voices for their time and for their emotional labor, as land acknowledgements became something that were more, people became more interested in doing and saw the need for it, as people responded to that call by the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture. Unfortunately, what also happened with that was an influx of communities, of cities, of schools, of groups reaching out to tribes, these sovereign nations that have their own goals and have their own priorities, and saying, hey, tell us how we should do this. Hey, can you help us? Can you tell us what you want us to do? Can you give us your input and your insight, which is all great. We really want to include them. And also that's not necessarily, helping us create our land acknowledgements isn't necessarily what their priorities are. And so in including Native voices, really making sure that we ask what we can do for them and their goals. And with that, accompanying our statement, whatever the statement that's made, by some concrete actions, things that we're actually doing to carry forward the goals. I've mentioned a number of times, it just was so essential to what we did because we didn't want this work to be being done in a vacuum or by just the work group, though the work group was representative of our community. We see the next step in the community involvement that has started in this process as continuing forward as an essential next step. And places where that community involvement could continue would be, as I mentioned before, some sort of standing committee or a work group that's tasked perhaps with other work in the DEI area, but specifically as also with the work of routinely reviewing and updating the statements in our supporting documents, planning and implementing culturally responsive programs that could be certainly not limited to, but again, outreach and inclusion of tribal members, an accuracy audit of any of our current records or media, art competitions and projects, educational events. I shared with council specifically a really great 3-part series that's being done. It was commissioned by Washington County by Five Oaks Museum on sort of like a crash course in Native and shared history from when land acknowledgements, sorry, my apologies. It was commissioned by Washington County because of their work in the same area, and the county commissioners feeling like they also needed some additional education and support, and seeing that that's a great place for our community as well, beyond just city council and city staff, potentially an educational series like that for our community, for them to learn more about this. The work group was thoughtful, and I appreciate this about them, of thinking, it was mentioned, especially if we think back if anybody participated from this group in the painting, the beautiful mural painting at Community Park. There was a really beautifully touching, personalized land acknowledgement statement that was done by the artist that day. And we saw that it's the potential for us to want to offer some flexibility. While we really appreciate our prose, if anyone's ever participated in a group writing project, it's very fun and also grueling. I see Mason smiling. We believe that all of the commas were placed in exactly the right places, right? But we recognize that not everybody always wants to speak a rehearsed statement. Sometimes there's tremendous power in that. I can think of the Pledge of Allegiance, for example, or if anyone has a faith base, any prayer that they've memorized from early in their life. But at the same time, we recognize there might need to be a chance for some flexibility in the giver of a land acknowledgement to make it more personalized. And so we identified these pillars, and you'll also find these listed in Appendix 12, which is the last page of the lengthy document I sent for your review. That these pillars, if someone's looking to create their own acknowledgement and have some flexibility with the prose, that it be founded in a purpose statement, that it have history and appropriate research as a part of it, that it references specific events like treaties, both ratified and unratified, that the specific tribes and bands and how they're currently represented are named, and that there's this pronunciation guide and any other resources. It was really important to the work group, and I share this with you tonight because that's something that came out of our work, that the statement be really honest and direct. Going back to that second slide of the zones of comfort, it not necessarily be softened to make it easier to give or listen to, but rather that it it be direct and mention things like settler colonialism, assimilation, and relocation. Additionally, some of those pillars are recognizing that the Native people are contemporary. If there was a single takeaway from our research, and the committee members or the work group members who are here tonight can speak to this, but it was, we are still here, that Native Americans and the Kalapuians and the Atfalati are still here, and they're still being impacted by our shared history. And that was a really key essential piece to what we learned. Obviously, as I've already talked about, that any sort of statement be accompanied, whether or not in spoken word or just in our resources available within the city, by some concrete actions or some things that we're actually doing as a community to give some material benefit to Native people. And that it includes some important mindsets. And I think this is sort of, it's like all collected in one bullet simply because I ran out of space. The mindset of this, of a land acknowledgement, come from a space of community, a space of gratitude, a recognition of sustainability, and of land stewardship over time. And those were all, I think you'll see that more than all the rest of these things in the actual statement that we crafted. So with that, I can finally share some of our work. This is where we started our why statement, the purpose statement. I know you all have it in front of you, but I feel like it might be powerful for me to read. May I get a acknowledgement that that would be okay from you? Okay. So our purpose. This acknowledgement is a first step in recognizing and sharing the honest history of how the land of the city of Tualatin was acquired. The land on which Tualatin was situated was obtained via various means, with both ratified and unratified treaties between the tribes and the United States government from 1853 to 1855, and including the 1850 Oregon Land Donation Claim Act, the unratified treaties of 1851 and 1854, and the Dawes Act in 1887, the results of which were some forced removal of tribal members from their ancestral homelands. This acknowledgement seeks to respect and witness members of our community, past, present, and future, who have been and will continue to be impacted by settler colonialism. By sharing this acknowledgement, we break the previous silence that perpetuated our complicity in the system of oppression. This acknowledgement is intended to be a foundation for building relationships within our community, as well as a catalyst for our continued truth-telling, critical thinking, and an action by our community members to support Indigenous communities. We were thrilled that one of your asks was for some guidelines for use, or some parameters, and we found a tremendous resource at the Willamette University website that I give them credit here because I really did just kind of tweak some things, but it gives some structure to where the acknowledgement at its creation at this point is intended to be used. Read at the beginning of all public meetings, read at the beginning of all community events, shared openly and publicly on our city website, and accompanied on the city website by other educational materials. So for example, this purpose statement would be accompanied, my apologies, this purpose statement would be a statement that's on the website. It wouldn't, that is not the acknowledgement statement itself, but it gives context and purpose to why this work was done. The acknowledgement also comes with obviously the permissions for anybody who wants to use it or share it at a meeting or event to be able to do so. Again, I know this slide has a lot of words on it, and my apologies. This is more intended to be for as a person who potentially has no knowledge of a land acknowledgement or has heard of one once, but is now being asked to provide one at the beginning of their meeting or their event, to give them some context and some structure so they don't feel like they're on an island in terms of the understanding. So it's a crash course in what am I doing here? Recognizing publicly Indigenous history, that the host and facilitator gives it. It's given regardless of whether Indigenous individuals are present, and it's not the assumed role of Indigenous folks that are present, that the acknowledgement should be practiced so that there is no pronunciation problems, and that, again, as we talked about, that there's those pillars for statement construction should someone want some more flexibility. And then, as we've already talked about twice tonight, but I think is important, we thought was important enough to recognize within the guidelines, that to name the discomfort that might be experienced by either the person giving or hearing it, and to recognize that that discomfort is not intended to be off-putting or divisive or a trigger, but rather really an opportunity to sit with those feelings and raise some empathy to similar feelings felt by Indigenous community members, and will hopefully ultimately inspire some action and awareness. Without further ado, right, I really pack a punch in terms of like leading up to something. Here's the acknowledgement statement as written by our work group. As we gather in community, we welcome everyone here with open hearts and minds. We offer gratitude for the land and our opportunity to be here today. Let us pause to acknowledge our presence on the unceded homelands and waters of the Atwalati Kalapuyans. Today, they are represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz. It is our duty to acknowledge the generational impacts of settler colonialism, forced displacement, and assimilation on Native American families. We recognize that these First Peoples, who coexisted in the interdependent and sustainable relationships with the land, are still here and connected to this place. We honor past, present, and future Indigenous members of the Tualatin community. I have included a glossary of terms that's also in your addendum packet. Some of those words are big. Not that you are not all extraordinarily intelligent people and no big words, but I think it's good to have the context, especially as we share this publicly, of what the context was for some of the things that we named. And I just want to give recognition to one last group of incredibly talented folks, and thanks to the Five Oaks Museum. All of the images that you saw as backgrounds to the exhibit today, or to our presentation, was from the This is Kalapuyan Land exhibit. I had the pleasure, named her at the beginning, of working with Stephanie Littleberg-Fogel, who is the curator of that exhibit. Her work was informed by, and I also had a chance to work with in this process, Dr. David Lewis at Oregon State, who's the preeminent Western states anthropologist for Native Americans, and learning more about that exhibit and seeing the beautiful art of the Native folks has been a real treat, and I hope that you enjoyed them as well. I would assume that there are some questions, so I'd be happy to stop share and come back to you all. I also want to thank, I see that Mason is here, Megan is here, obviously Valerie is here, and I think I saw Emma, but she may have had to step out. So Emma was here for a bit. Feel free. Oh, there's Emma. There she is, right in the middle of my screen.
Right. Well, thank you, Beth, and everyone who was part of this effort. When I read the report, like you mentioned, it's obvious the significant effort that was put into this. Based on your report and your PowerPoint slides, that you took this very seriously, did a lot of research, and the group presented us a terrific report. I mean, it's very well done, and like you mentioned, it was done for free on volunteer time. So thank you very much for that. So with that, I'll open the floor to councilors for questions for Beth or her team. Councilor Pratt.
Hey, Beth and Megan and Emma. I have to say this was, I've been on a lot of committees, and this was really a great one. And I felt like I think Beth already stated, that everybody gave a lot to the process, and everybody was open and honest without being hurtful. So it was really a great experience. My question to you, I guess, is it was in your statement earlier, but I just would like you to reiterate what you'd like our next steps to be with this process.
Yeah, great question. I think, first comes from just the first priority was just daylighting our work, making good on the work that you asked us to do. So coming here and presenting what we've done to date, a dialogue and a discussion amongst you and with our input, if you'd like it, of what you see as next steps with this. The work group, as we disbanded or paused, I don't know which one you can call it, would like for you to consider having this be something that we use citywide, that we recommend or require. I don't know, that has to be up to you and your governance, but using this in the ways that we outlined in the guidelines for use. We of course would, as a group of people who came together to do this, think that it should be used, but we also recognize that might take some dialogue and discussion amongst you before that there's a level of comfort for that.
Other questions? Councilor Brooks, then Councilor Hilliard, then Councilor Sacco.
Thank you, Beth and Emma and Mason and Councilor Pratt, and I'm not sure who else is here.
Megan.
But it's an incredible report, and I don't know if I have a lot to digest actually around the report, because it's a lot, and I am in support of having a land acknowledgement. And I'm also, and I've talked about this a little bit individually, I'm wondering about our ad hoc committee with the DEI committee that we're doing, and if this is a place that we can continue community conversations. And I hope that the committee, I don't know how the rest of council feels, but I hope that the committee sees that as a engagement point and not a way of not doing it, because I just want to be really clear that I'm in favor of land acknowledgements, and I do appreciate the fact that this was a call from the USDAC. So I appreciate the attention, it being brought to our attention, and I appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you.
Councillor Hillier, then Councillor Sacco.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Beth and team. In the world I work in, we have land acknowledgements from different Indigenous groups across the nation. And it's been fascinating to hear just the hearts of different people across our nation as they engage in this work, and really truly bring it to a place where you move people, across that continuum that you were referring to, Beth, because sometimes when a land acknowledgement is 7 pages long, that is a mandatory read, that evokes different, like, I wish I could have heard the one paragraph that the team, that you were all together, because it was so clear and so honest and so heartfelt. And I just am very moved by your work and want to say thank you very much. I echo Councillor Brooks's comments that I think last council meeting, I've honestly lost a little bit of track. We're moving towards council goals with the DEI work group, and wow, you kind of make us look good already, I think. So at any rate, but I just wanted to say thank you and echo other comments. And I too feel the same way. This needs to be moved forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Mayor Bumnick, may I respond to a thought that was shared by Councillor Hillier?
Sure.
Thank you for those kind words and the note of praise, and also thank you to Councillor Brooks for the note that this is an engagement point and not a deferral. I really appreciate that, and also that I just need to reference that we did at one point have a 2-page acknowledgement statement, and I know I saw Mason light up when you said 7 pages. It was really, really important to us that we have something, and I was thinking of you, Mayor Bubnik, when I timed it. I timed it like 6 different times, and it's always under a minute. So in 1 minute, in less than 1 minute, we can make a tremendous impact, and that these words, they do really have meaning. So thank you for that, for the recognition of that. My apologies. Thank you.
Councillor Sacco.
Thank you. And thank you, Beth, and your leadership and all the committee members that worked on this. As I was reading through my packet last week and I saw all of this work and the 46 pages of information, I was really blown away by the, not just the amount of work, but the details that were covered. And so I'm not left with many questions, because a lot of my questions that I have been answered through this very comprehensive work that has already been done. So thank you. The only comment that I really had was, which Councillor Brooks had already mentioned, is that I really feel this probably lives in the new DEI committee that we're forming. And also wanted to say that I am in support of having a land acknowledgement, and I was really moved by the words of not only the purpose, but the land acknowledgement. And thank you for taking the time to read those slides today, Beth. I think that was very powerful. So once again, thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry that I gave you 46 additional pages. I know you're all very busy people. Thank you for.
Don't apologize. That shows the amount of effort and care you had about this project.
I'm
And
an
it wasn't-
academic by heart, so.
Yeah, and it wasn't boring 46 pages of government blah blah blah.
It's
It
true.
was very well written. Any other questions, comments? I'm hearing that folks are very supportive of the effort, that we want to accept the work that's been done. It sounds like we'd like to hand this off to our ad hoc DEI committee once it's formed to then bring this out, as Beth said, put more light on it throughout the community, get a little bit further community input on this, and then circle back on what their recommendations are, and eventually do have a land use acknowledgement. Is that what I'm hearing? Councilor Brooks.
I like that idea. I also recognize there's a resource that there's a consulting firm that has 2 Native American women on it, and there might be a little piece of work that they could also do with us, I think, as a city. And I like that idea very much, especially to have some people paid to just help the city do the very best job that we can do with not only having a statement, but also where we're going with this and the community engagement around it. I want our community to be as educated as I feel right now with my 45 pages. And, but I don't want them to have to read 45 pages. And yeah, unless they want to. So that I just want to throw that out there. But I agree. Thank you.
Councilor Pratt.
First, I want to say the 46 pages are a great base for our DEI group. And the other thing I just don't want left as this transitions to another group is the fact that we need to build that relationship with the Grand Ron in the process.
Mm-hmm. Nice, good point.
If I may,
Sure.
Mayor Bubnik, one of the people to whom I reached out, and I mentioned him before, Dr. David Lewis. Again, he's a cultural anthropologist and a Western States Native expert out of Oregon State University. A number of his resources are referenced in your resource list, so you likely have already read his work if you sifted through that a bit. He, in my conversation with him, one of my questions to him was, how do thank you for your time that he was willing to give us, and he has reviewed the statement for just historical accuracy. He said, beyond that, that's something that he needs to get paid for. And he said, I'm willing to do that, but I have a full-time job. And so as you look to potentially pay people, I certainly don't want to circumvent other resources or connections that we have, but the people are out there. We just simply need to acknowledge that their time being spent to do this is just like we would hire a contractor to do other work for us at the city level.
Thank you. Anything else for Beth and her team? It's good to see you, Mason. It's been a while. See your face there for art committee days. All right. Well, again, thank you very much. It sounds like, we want to continue the effort here. We're looking at the beginning of the new year of getting this DEI committee stood up. And they already will have, once they get organized, they have their first task to go out to the community and work with this and come back with another recommendation. It looks pretty solid right now, but we always want to have expanded community outreach and support for the things we do.
Yeah. May I ask if it's possible for me to check back in or be connected with that? I feel like we've teed up a really nice juicy ball and a big driver. So if I might have contact or connection with whomever is in leadership for that group, I'd love to.
Please do. Yeah, Megan, I think Megan will be part of that effort. Yep. Megan
her well.
Bensky, of course, our city manager.
Yeah. Thanks, Megan.
All right. Well, thanks for coming tonight, Beth. Very
Yes,
much
thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you, Mason and Emma, for being here as well.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to our Metro update with our Metro Councillor, Garrett Rosenthal. I saw his face before. Where'd he go?
I'm here.
There you are. Welcome,
Yep.
Councillor. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And I will, let me figure out how to share screen here. Where is that? There it is. Are you seeing our metro update?
Yes, but a little shrunken.
Let's see, how do I get that clear?
You can click on that arrow that's right there next to, it will just remove that window where it says comment, fill in. Just go a little bit right under.
Oh,
the
fill
middle.
ins.
No, middle, go down a little bit. No.
Oh,
It's just an extra, you have it to, yeah,
Getting
there
there.
you go. You got it,
Better.
you got it.
do the plus, you mean?
Yeah, that'd work.
Okay. All right. And how do I get rid of the bar at the top? Does anybody know? I don't know what you're seeing.
Okay, just you see that X on your right hand side, the X right there. Click that. No, not that one. That one. Click that one.
That didn't work.
And then go where there's an arrow right next to the boy's arm, or keep going down, down, down. Go down, down. And then right there's an arrow right, and I can't show it to you. Go up by his.
I don't see I don't see an arrow on my screen, so I.
Right there. Keep going.
Council, I have this queued up if you would like me to present.
That would probably be a little. Because I don't see exactly what you're seeing. I don't see an arrow down there.
Thank you,
It's
babe.
right next to it. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, there you
There
go.
we go.
Good.
That's
Brilliant.
good.
Thank you.
I'll just have to tell you to move the slides along. I appreciate the ability or your invitation to come and make a presentation to your council. As you know, Metro does a lot of things that impacts Tualatin as well as the other cities in the region. And the slideshow will cover a couple of them. We'll cover a couple more in details. Some of the things that have to do with parks, have to do with land use planning, which is sort of quiet right at the moment, have to do with the performance venues are also important to people in Tualatin, and Parks and Nature will cover that. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the redistricting process, which has the potential to affect Tualatin. So with that start, and there will be room for questions, or if you have burning questions, ask them at any time. Can we move to the next slide? As you know, in 2020, we passed the Supportive Housing Services Bill, which provides a lot of money. That money is in the process of rolling in, because obviously it takes the taxation process. And so some money has been available so far, but the main bulk of the money is going to come in the next tax cycle. All 3 county local implementation plans have been approved. They're working on the details, and we're negotiating with the counties to complete and sign the final activities of what they're going to do. A lot of residents, or some residents have already been placed in supportive housing. And probably this works in close concert with, and in the timing is very critical with the housing bond. As you know, there's housing units being built throughout the area, and we'll cover that in the next one. As they become built, we now have the facility, or we're ramping up in all the counties. We're ramping up the ability to put people in and provide the services they need. The supportive housing services process is run, basically, the money comes from Metro, but it's run by the counties. The county administers it. But that's not quite the same as with the housing services. So we move on to the next slide. The affordable housing bond was passed in 2018, approximately 625 million. I was recently privileged to be at the opening of one of the first one that was fully open, the Marianne in Beaverton, 56 units already. They've got 80 to 100 people on a waiting list. Nice facilities. Rockwood Village became available on that, and there is another one, the Viewfinder in Tigard, which is in the process right now. There's about 600 units, that is to say, living units, in the process, and there's 2,100 that are on the planning, and we are both, shall we say, ahead of the goal in terms of the number of units and ahead of the goal in terms of how much money we're spending on it. So in other words, due to some of the financial situations, we've been able to move forward a little more quickly. But of course, there are headwinds such as increased materials costs and so forth, such as that. So there are things, 50% of these units are generally dedicated to less than 30% adjusted mean income, and another 50% or about there. There's always some managerial or sometimes people who are on site for providing services. So not all of the facility is geared to this, but another 50% for those that are less than 60%. So the process is moving forward, and as these become available, the Marianne, the Beaverton, the Viewfinder, and Tigard, and I know that Tualatin is planning for a similar facility that's going to have Metro support. As these come online, more people will be able to move into them, and we'll be able to provide people with long-term solutions to the homeless crisis. It isn't going to solve everything, but it's going to certainly help. Can we move on to the next slide? Parks and Nature Bond. On this slide, I want to remember, as you know, the last time I was in front of the council, there were some questions about the Parks and Nature Bond and how that's working out. I've brought along today several people with our Parks Bond that have been in direct contact with your Parks people. There's Juan Carlos Ocaña Chiu, and I just met her recently, Antonia Machado. And they are here to talk a little bit about the Parks program specifically, and they'll take the next couple slides. Juan Carlos.
Thank you, Councillor Rosenthal, and good evening, Mayor and Tualatin Council members. My name is Juan Carlos Ocaña Chiu, and I am the Community Investments and Cemeteries Manager for Metro Parks and Nature. And my colleague, Antonia Machado, who is the Local Share Program Manager, is also joining me and the Councillor today. Antonia is the point person for Local Share, which is one of the programs that I'm going to mention in this update. As you know, the good news and the big developments currently that has Metro Parks and Nature really excited are the opening of two facilities. The first one is Chehalem Ridge, a nature park, which is located south of Forest Grove, and it's set to open this winter. So that's a project of regional significance that is relatively close to the city of Tualatin. And the second project is Newell Creek Canyon, which is perhaps closer to the city of Tualatin. Newell Creek will also open in the first half of 2022, and it is located in Oregon City. Both places are great natural areas that provide the opportunity for the community to connect with nature, which is one of the big goals of the 2019 Parks and Natural Areas Bond. With regards to Local Share, as you remember, this is the program that allocates money from the bond for to support local programs. The city of Tualatin has an allocation of $1,581,005, and so this project will provide that funding for different programs in your city that meet the Parks and Nature Bond goals of connecting people with nature and protecting fish and wildlife habitat and air and water quality in our region. So the new developments or more recent developments in Local Share are that in September, Metro Council approved an IGA template for Local Share projects, which will make it easier to allocate money or to start funding the projects that the communities, the jurisdictions and other park providers in the region bring to us for consideration. Also, since June, the local park providers have been able to submit priority projects for Metro for consideration for Local Share funding, and we're very close to making the first investment of a Local Share project in the region. So we're really excited. Also, as it relates to Tualatin and other jurisdictions and park providers, we have been working with staff directly to make sure that they have what they need to meet the bond goals and criteria. And So I'm happy to relate. I saw Ross Hoover is here on the call. So Antonia and myself have been meeting with Ross and other staff at the city of Tualatin and having some really good conversations about projects that the city is considering to submit for local share funding. We actually just had a conversation early this morning, and we are all really excited about the opportunities and the ideas that the city of Tualatin staff are bringing up to us. So I'm sure that we will be able to continue to work productively with staff to make sure that the projects that the city of Tualatin brings to us will meet all the criteria and goals and objectives, and will be able to be funded as soon as possible by Metro. So if I could have the next slide, please. And this is another opportunity and body of work that's happening in Metro Parks and Nature that I wanted to highlight. It's the potential levee renewal. As you know, the bond measures and the levee measures are linked together to make our region's system of parks, trails, and natural areas possible. The bond money funds the capital projects that create these parks, you know, the acquisitions or other physical improvements that allow folks in the community to connect with nature. But to fund maintenance and operations and other programs that support, improve, and restore what we build, we have twice asked the community in the region to for approval of a local option levy for protecting clean water, restoring fish and wildlife habitat, and connecting people with nature in our region. The current levy is set to expire in June of 2023. And earlier this spring, Metro Council asked Parks and Nature staff to develop a potential levy renewal that could be referred to voters in 2022. The direction that we received is to keep the same tax rate and to build off the existing framework and categories of programming in the existing levy, and also to prioritize racial equity and climate resilience, as we have been doing in all of our programs, all of the programs that Metro implements. So that concludes my presentation, and I would like to turn it back over to Councillor Rosenthal. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. I would just want to add a couple things about parks. First of all, the Renewal Creek is the first Metro Park that has a mountain bike terrain, and the Chehalem Ridge is actually, it's pronounced Cha, because that's the Kalapuyan pronunciation, unlike our soft Sha. And that'll have horse trails, and both of them we had a pre-opening with council staff, and they all open with a land acknowledgement statement. Not exactly the same one that Tualatin is considering. One other thing I have to mention, of course, the zoo this may be of interest to people with who know people with kids, is the zoo lights will start November 19th and will run until I think January 4th or something like that, and it's going to have both walkthrough as well as car kinds of possibilities. And I just have to say a little bit that we should all be proud of. And I can't claim credit, but they finished the 10-year zoo bond, construction bond, both on schedule and under budget, including with the pandemic. So we have new facilities for the rhinos, for the polar bears, and for the primates. So it's really quite beautiful. So when anybody gets a chance, it's worth taking a visit. Can we move to the next slide, please? Garbage and recycling. You are all aware of the problem more in Portland, certainly not than out here in Tualatin, but we got a big hit during the pandemic because we couldn't use a lot of the crews that we had. And so we basically, illegal dumping sort of got out of hand in a certain sense because we just couldn't get to it in time with all the safety issues. We now have a total of 5 new RID crews. That's the removal crews, as opposed to Ridwell, which is a whole another private sector. But this is the RID patrol. And we've reduced the illegal dumping from, it was up to about 70 days. Now it's down to 11 or 12 days. So we're able to get at things. And one important thing to note is that over 60% of the cleanups are due to dumping of personal waste, illegal dumping, not due to the homeless camps. They do contribute, but they are not the predominant thing. So it's really people sort of either taking advantage of what they think is a cheap opportunity, or they just don't have the vehicle to drive down to South Station and so forth. One other thing I want to mention is that's coming up is, of course, the compostable food wastes coming from grocery stores and stuff. There was a mandate to have larger stores that produce large quantities of food waste, restaurants and grocery stores, to have a process and start collecting that. That was moved to March of 2022. And the solid waste, the WPES group, is actually going out for requests for adding a processing facility to their central station so they can receive these wastes, compost them, turn them into liquid, and then that liquid will then be, with methane capture, will then be taken to the city of Portland, their treatment lagoons. So that is a process that's ongoing, and it will affect larger grocery stores or food processors in our district. There's a map available on site that shows all the different locations that would be impacted at some level over the next year or so. Next one, next slide, please. This is one of the biggest things that we're very proud of, and this is the construction career pathways. First of all, there's a large upgrade project at Blue Lake Park. It's became the first construction career pathways project in the region. Recently, a presentation to the Beaverton City Council, and they were very interested in this. Basically, it provides for creating pathways for people who work on these construction projects to move up, develop further skills, and move on and improve their lives and improve their economic situations. The Portland Community College has signed on to as the 6th government partner in this program. So it's taking hold, and it's something that's going to affect construction at all of Metro's facilities and all the kinds of the big projects we do, and hopefully all the projects that happen elsewhere. We can move on to, let's see, the next slide is just the final slide, I believe. But I should mention a little bit about redistricting. As you know, redistricting is in process. There are public hearings, 6 o'clock tomorrow night and 6 o'clock Wednesday night, about the redistricting. The redistricting group, which is a subgroup of the council, came up with 5 proposed plans. I urge you to look at them. Several of them, the biggest, well, Metro District 3 grew more than the other districts. So because there is a goal of making them all approximately the same size within a couple percent, Metro District 4, which is north of TV Highway, is going to have to shrink a little bit. Conversely, Metro District, I guess it's 1 out in the East County, is going to have to grow because it didn't grow as fast. This district grew a little more than the rest, but not enough to get outside the percentage range. Some of the proposals call for it taking the East Tualatin area out of this district and moving it into District 2. Some of them do not. Some of them call for expansion on the north. So it's worth looking at, and I would look for any guidance or any comments from the council on this aspect, and to the extent that this is an important issue. Like I said, this process has to be finished by the 7th of December. I may have that off by a date or so, because we then have to appoint a replacement councillor for Bob Stacy, who had to resign. So that process is underway. I urge you to go to look at the public hearings and make comments on the maps, and we're open to questions.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor. Questions for Councillor Rosenthal? Councillor Pratt.
Thank you for coming back, and especially with the parks information. I'm going to start with the housing, though. My first question is, as I'm sure you're aware, Clackamas County is kind of holding up releasing these funds, saying they're waiting for this IGA to get signed. So do you have any expectation of when that'll happen? We were told June originally, so I'm just wondering if you have any feeling of when that will be done.
That's a very good question. I really can't speak for Clackamas County. I know they're actively working on it. There are lesser problems. There were some technical issues and oversight issues with all of them. I know the county staff is supportive of getting this going. I'm pretty sure that it'll get done certainly by the time the major amounts of funding are available, but I really can't give you a number. It seems to be a little bit elusive.
Okay. And
Sorry
then,
about that.
no, that's okay. I was just hoping I heard something that was helpful. So, and then I'm wondering, with this, I'm not sure how to word this. It seems like from what I'm reading from all the stuff with the homelessness, that the big thing to really keep people moving forward for a long time is long-term rental assistance and wraparound services. And how much
Yes.
of, I guess it's kind of a two-part question. You probably don't have a real answer, but how much of this will it help, I guess, in that area?
Well, the supportive housing services should generate upwards of $180 million a year. That's distributed about half of it goes to Multnomah County, and the other half is divided between the other two counties. It should be a substantial amount. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but previously Washington County was spending on the order of 15 to 20 million, and this will give them an additional 30 million. And it will provide for mental health. It will provide for substance abuse problems. In many of these facilities, there will be like the N-Star will be in some of them facilities. They will have a resident person who will be able to help people with special problems. And this is going to be funded. And there will be long-term rental assistance programs, but those have not been all worked out for each of the facilities. So I don't know the details on those at this point in time.
Okay,
So it should help. It won't solve the problem completely, but the goal is to basically what we call functionally to functionally eliminate it. There are some people, and this is interesting in a recent visit to Newell Creek, there are some people that are living in the Newell Creek area that they want to live there. They want to live away from the grid. That group of people will still be there, I'm sure. But we may have better services through a better funding. Clackamas County will be able to spread its services wider. They have a big county, only a portion of which is in Metro. And so they will be, I believe their intent is to expand their services to some of their more outlying areas as well.
That's my understanding too. Then I'll go on to the parks. Last time we talked to you, I think I'm not alone in this, but we have a park, Stone Ridge Park, that we've gone through the planning phase, and it's in an economically challenged neighborhood. And we'd really like to have these funds, these local share funds to rebuild that park and serve that community. But I thought, and I haven't looked back at it, but I thought there was some DEI language in the allocation of these funds. And tonight I'm hearing it's more of an environmental, natural thing. So, and I don't know if you can answer this, or maybe we'll have to have Ross come back, but I'd really like to know where we could use these funds in our, if we could use it for Stone Ridge Park, or if this is something we'll have to allocate to like Browns Ferry Park, or maybe Basalt Creek when we develop that path in a natural area. And I don't know how much you could speak to that, but whatever you have is great.
Well, I'll just make a comment that we've had parts of this discussion before. There's a limitation on spending of some of those funds on sports facilities, but I think I would turn it over to Juan Carlos to see if he has any more. He's the one who's been dealing directly with your Parks Department, and he can talk more directly to this.
Thank you. If it's okay with council, I would love to respond to that. So it's a great.
Please do. Please do.
Thank you. It's a great question, and you're absolutely right, Councillor Pratt, that the 2019 Parks and Nature Bond puts diversity, equity, and inclusion front and center, as well as meaningful community engagement. So when we first had the conversation about the park you're referring to with Ross and his team, we really appreciated the great community engagement work that the City of Tualatin staff have done. I think it's a great example for other jurisdictions in the region. We really think it's a great, it demonstrates the commitment that I'm hearing today in this council session that the City of Tualatin has made to advancing racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, which is not necessarily the case across all jurisdictions. So it's really, so we love that. But unfortunately, that the desires and the aspirations of the Latino community I kind of run into other constraints that we have for the 2019 bond, which have been in place for previous Metro Parks and Nature bonds, which are that we want that money to be invested in projects that connect people with nature, as opposed to more traditional recreational uses, such as sports fields, which, if I remember correctly, was what the Latino community had indicated they really would like to see there. So it was really hard for us to hear that, because we could see the quality of the community engagement work that the Tualatin staff conducted, and then it was like, that's great, but it doesn't fit the rest of the framework of the 2019 bond. So in conversations with Ross and Antonia and other staff from both Metro and the City of Tualatin, we are looking at other places in the Tualatin Park system where there could be investments made that fulfill the bond requirements of connecting people with nature and protecting fish and wildlife habitat, while at the same time centering racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. So it's not one or the others. It's bringing together DEI and environmental goals in the projects that are more specific to the language that was referred to the voters and approved by them. So I hope that helps answer the question, and I'd love to, if possible, hear also Ross's perspective on the work that we have been doing.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pratt, for the question, and Juan Carlos and Antonia. Appreciate your talking about this topic. Certainly one that our community is interested in. How do we fund our parks? And certainly the Parks and Nature bond and grant programs are a portion of that. What we know about Stone Ridge Park in particular, as we did the meaningful engagement portion as required by the Metro bond and grant, what we heard from our community was that Stone Ridge Park really needs a set of play features and spaces for people to recreate actively. And so when we proposed different options to community, including a nature play area, our community pretty loudly and convincingly indicated they weren't interested in a natural or native play area. So we heard from our community members that that's the direction they wanted to go in, and that's what our site plan indicates. So that's why for Stone Ridge Park, we're not considering the funding source of the local share from Metro for that particular site. What we are working with Metro local share staff on is finding a site, a confluence site of meeting the requirements within the grant of equity and inclusion at the center, but also climate resiliency and meaningful engagement, and making sure that we find a site where those criteria intersect. And that's what we're working with Metro staff on right now.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that.
Other questions for Councillor Rosenthal? Councillor Reyes and then Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what our community is saying, and there are, especially in that area that we just talked earlier, that Ross was talking about, It is a community with lots of young Latino families that do want to utilize that as a place where they can go with their children because they live in apartment complex that they don't have, most of them don't have a backyard, most of them don't have a recreational area within their own apartment complex. So they're looking for something that they can do, so maybe some carne asada, Juan Carlos, our community does that a lot. They like to get together and cook and eat and celebrate birthdays. And I think that, while the kids do this, they just want something that it's more recreational where they can spend time with their families and bond. And I love nature walks. I'm one of those people that take those, but I feel like when we do these kinds of bonds or plans, we should consider the area where that I think these are the things that I would like to see family oriented for a diverse group of people that are still young and they want their kids to grow healthy in a healthy environment and enjoy their community. I think I just want to reiterate that because I was part of that group and I was part of those conversations with the art community, and I just feel like I'm still fighting for that. Does that make sense? I really want that to be considered as we move forward with any kind of parks and recreations, and to talk to us, because we know the community that it's in our area. So just want to say that.
Thank you. Personally, I fully agree that kids need both nature as well as sports, the organizational aspects of it. And I think, obviously, looking backwards, if the bond issue had been worded differently, it might have more flexibility. But it is somewhat constrained by the wording of the original bond issue.
Councilor Brooks.
Thank you, Garrett, and thank you, Juan Carlos. I'm just going to dovetail on this conversation as well, really quickly. And I do think for future, as a social worker, we do person-centered planning. So we don't tell the stakeholders what they should want. We plan around what their desires are. And I think there's something that's maintains the dignity and respect of the community to help support them, especially in spaces that really aren't places. It's just a small area. It's not a place that could even be a nature walk if it wanted to in a kind of a way. So I just hope that if we do another bond in the future that has these same goals, and I'm in a very much invested in environmental protection, but I also think that health and well-being and livability, especially for places where people have limited access to yards and outdoor space in general, I just hope that we think about that, the wording in the future if we do similar goals. And I just want to put that out there. I wanted to also ask you, Garrett, if it was kind of similar to what Councillor Pratt's question was around the wraparound services. I'm curious with the developments, if you have any idea of what percentage of those developments will have wraparound services.
At this point in time, I don't. I know some of them that are being filled now will have some, but I can't tell you an idea of the percentage. They all have special design features to provide better facilities for people of lower income who may be limited. Yeah, I think it's going to be on a case by case basis. There is for example, the Mary Ann has, I believe, an office for an on-site person to help people with special problems, so wraparound services. I think BNStar is the one that is going to be manning that. I'm not sure all of the things under construction have exactly that same arrangement.
Okay, and I know that there'll probably be some that services come in, but I'm really curious because I know that the research shows that to help keep people in place, those services are really, really important.
Absolutely.
And I'm really proud and excited that the SEPA site will have places for wraparound services. So I'm really happy about that. I also missed what you said about the percentage of dumping that is from private versus homeless.
It's over 60% is from private, not from the homeless camps.
Okay.
I don't know the exact number.
No, that's good to know. And then my last question, and thank you very much for the presentation too. It's very well, it's good to know everything that's going on. My last question has to do back with the parks again and the prioritization of fish and wetlands. And I don't know how to ask this question exactly, but we've had situations, not just in our city, but across Washington County, where they're doing a lot of building of roadways over wetlands. And it seems to be the last place where we were protecting them better before. So I'm just curious, what metros is there anything, I see things about rehabilitating nature, but nothing about protecting it in the first place, which is much more cost effective than mitigating the damage in the long run. For instance, I went on a Riverkeepers tour and they said every month a dump truck of silt goes into the Tualatin River from erosion problems. So I'm just curious if we can build on what we're doing in a protection way with especially with the fish with this incredible droughts that we're seeing. It just seems like we need to go the extra mile to me. And I'm just curious if there's room for that kind of thinking with Metro.
Well, you're right. It's an interesting and somewhat difficult problem. I mean, our tools are to some extent limited. In other words, there's a lot of wetland. When it comes to an urban growth boundary expansion or a new development expansion, it's something we pay a lot of attention to. And there's for example, there will be some expansions, for example, in the Tigard River Terrace and in the King City areas that we are paying attention to that are affected by Metro. We are limited when it's already inside in a developable area and it's a small wetland that has not met the priorities for regional focus. In other words, we can't go by, or we are not the regulating entity in that regard. So we can't enforce laws that protect wetlands. That's really going to be either the DSL or the Department of Environmental Quality. So we're a little bit limited in that sense, and that we sort of, there's as you say, there's just a smaller wetland kind of group of wetlands that we don't directly have an impact on. It's the larger ones. For example, the Chehalem Ridge protects a lot of headwaters that are tributaries to the Tualatin, and Newell Creek protects a significant tributary to the Clackamas, and those will really help. And those are one of the goals of some parks like that, as well as, of course, I don't know if it much drains off of, but there is a creek in Graham Oaks as well. So that's only a partial answer. I wish we could do more, but we are somewhat limited in our jurisdictional authority on wetlands.
I see Juan Carlos's hand.
If he has an extra comment, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brooks and Councillor Rosenthal. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that protecting land and restoring land is the largest program area of the 2019 bond. It has, out of the $475 million that we will obtain throughout the life of the bond, 155 million of the entire bond proceeds will be allocated for protecting and restoring land. So so there will be some opportunities. Again, 155 million sounds like a lot of money. But when you look at the size of our region and all the different areas where Metro could purchase land for protection, it's a good effort, but it's not as much as we would like it to be. I would encourage you to go to our bond webpage and I don't know, I don't work in that program, so I couldn't speak with a lot of information, but my colleagues who work in the Protect and Restore Land Bond program are finalizing the target areas, the establishment of target areas throughout the entire region and outside of the region as well. There's mostly the acquisitions will take place outside of the region to protect those regionally significant habitats and pieces of land that are considered to be ecologically significant. So they are in the middle of, more toward the end of finalizing the definition of those target areas for land acquisition. And it's also important to mention that work has been done with a lot of community outreach, and especially involving the tribes, the different Indian tribes that have been the stewards of that land since time immemorial, and who are have requested strongly that Metro work with them directly to identify not only the lands that are ecologically significant, but the ones where that intersect with culturally significant areas that those tribes have already identified in the region. So there will be some opportunities to do that, and but that work will be more formally announced in the next few months.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and as he mentioned, I mean, regionally significant is one thing, but as you point out, there's still a problem with the individually not regionally significant, but when you add them all together in little pieces, it's the death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. And that's an area that we have less control over.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I just want to say that because I know that we've been talking about the trail extension where they're going to put the Basalt Creek extension. And I just got a report from Washington County that the sound mitigation is too expensive for the homeowners to do for that connector. And so how that impacts the trail connections there and the livability for all of us here as that sound echoes down the canyon into all of our neighborhoods is going to be interesting. So I don't know if there's ways of Metro helping with mitigation, if that goes forward, or taking looks at that. But I just want to bring that up, especially since you're here, Councillor, and Juan Carlos, and I just really appreciate all your work. Thank you so much.
Be happy to look into it. I don't know anything about that at this point in time.
I'll forward you the report.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Well, I've got 4 for you, of course, Garrett.
Oh, that's that.
All right. So circling back to redistricting, my opinion is Tualatin is not to be split. Tualatin was split between congressional districts, and our folks on the east side of Tualatin were always underrepresented by Congressman Schrader. They didn't basically exist. So with the new 6th congressional district, the proposal is that Tualatin will be all one for, finally, that we don't have to deal with 2 separate congressional folks. I don't want to deal with 2 Metro councilors, to be honest.
I support you in that.
All right. There's no reason to split the city apart. We're a one city, figure out the boundary around like they did for the 6th congressional district. That's item number 1. Item number 2, as you're well aware, we've discussed this, that Renewal is operating in the metro region illegally in all of our cities. And I'm aware that there's a license that they've applied for a solid waste facility through Metro. My understanding is that public comment is through the end of November.
Mhm.
So what's the process after that?
Well, the process is they were given until the 15th of November to complete their DEQ permit. So they haven't submitted the DEQ permit, and then we will take into consideration the comments on the Ridwell process. Every city, of course, is dealing with it a little bit differently, but we'll wait, and then we have to pretty much wait until the DEQ sends their report on the permit. If they deny it, of course, then that's one thing. If they say, yeah, we have no problems, then we have to start looking. Then we have to look at the comments. We still have to look at the comments for what the various cities have provided on Whitwell. Some, like I said, Gresham is handling it differently than Beaverton is trying to handle it. So we're in a bit of a holding period right at the moment. They are operating, and it's been a longstanding Metro policy, from what I understand, is that they started as a business, and then we later determined that they actually were a waste receiving facility.
Mhm.
So our policy is, since we made that determination after they started, we are not in a position to shut them down at the moment. So we
Right.
have to wait until we go through the permit process.
Okay, we look forward to that because our city staff is continuing to work with Ridwell also, but the goal is to have them operate as a legitimate business in each city and in the metro area. So looking forward to resolution there. Going back to the renewal of the parks bond, as Councillor Brooks mentioned, that I look forward to way more specific wording and very specifics of what the new bond would pay for. Being blindsided by the constraints of the existing bond has ticked off a lot of the local area mayors who supported this back when Councilor Dirksen was here. And to be honest, I'll be very reluctant to put my name behind or endorse a renewal levy unless I know exactly what this thing's going to pay for. And I can see, as Councilor Brooks said, there's the environmental part of it, but there's also the recreation part of it. And I don't want to see us put in a situation again where Hillsborough, Tigard, and Tualatin are looking for parks that Metro does not pay any funds from the bond for because it doesn't meet your criteria that, quite frankly, we weren't aware of when this went for renewal. So I'm being honest with you, it's got to be black and white and let me know what's going to be paid for, what's not going to be paid for. I'm going to run it by my parks people before I'll even supporting it. And then finally, Hillsborough, I don't know if you've heard this yet. Hillsborough brought up a concern that they had that Metro was awarded about $12 million in federal dollars for roadway systems, and that it was intended for cities and counties, and that the cities and counties, as far as Tualatin and Hillsborough, were never even informed of this, and that Metro decided how to allocate the dollars. And a lot of these dollars are going to 82nd in Portland, and no feedback from us on what kind of projects we would like to have some money for. So I'll follow up with you on that, because there was a late Friday thing that I heard about that Hillsborough was very upset about, that here's $12 million that lands at Metro, and the Metro staff basically decided how to allocate those dollars.
This is not something that I'd heard about previously. Of course, as you know, $12 million doesn't go very far on
No, it
a highway
doesn't.
project.
But if you divvied it up by city and population, that would have been on about 150 grand for Tualatin, which would have paid for a couple of pedestrian LED crosswalks.
I hope to talk to you more about that.
Yep.
Because
Okay.
this is news to me. I had not heard that.
Okay, I just heard it late, so that's all
And
I have.
we'll work on the specificity of the proposed bond renewal, which is primarily going to be for maintenance of the existing facilities. I mean, as you know, getting rid of blackberries takes multiple years. You can't do it in just one cycle. So that's primarily what it's going to be, but the exact wording is something that we will make sure that the mayors are fully aware of.
Okay, I see Juan Carlos has his hand up. Is that from before, or you have another comment?
No, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to add, Councillor Rosenthal is absolutely right that a lot of the money proposed in the renewal of the levy will be for that maintenance work, for non-capital work, right? And as you all know, the bond by law has to be spent in capital projects. So the levy is much more flexible and allows Metro to take care of that land, not just acquire it, but actually restore it to its to the state that we would like it to be. And the other important thing that this levy funding does is it provides for programs that work with people directly. So while the capital projects that the bond pays for are hopefully designed or acquired and we want them to be done with people in mind, but it's really the levy that allows us to do the kind of programming that connects people with nature, that helps the BIPOC community members to have the opportunity to use not just Metro's park system, but all other park system. And the shape that those programs takes are nature education, community stewardship of land, partnerships between BIPOC-led organizations and government entities and others, and also grants. We allocate a lot of funding in grants for this kind of programming precisely. So yeah, I think that definitely my colleagues who are working on the levy will relay that the importance of being clear about what this programming is. But a lot of it, again, you can see it in the programming that's currently being done by Metro, which includes a lot of those programs that work directly with people. Because unfortunately, with the bond money, which is much more a much bigger pot of money, we cannot do all that direct programming with community members that the levy allows us to do. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that, Juan Carlos, and I look forward to discussing this with Metro folks to make sure we're all clear on what the levy is going to pay for and not pay for, and how it will assist the cities in their mission of getting, preserving nature and having safe places for people to recreate. Any other questions for Councilor Rosenthal and his team? Council President Grimes.
Thank you. Good evening. Yeah, it's not so much a question, rather I would just like to echo what Mayor Lubenick said about whatever the redistricting and the new assignment of districts looks like. Tualatin needs to be dealt with as one whole city. It's sort of an archaic concept that there is even such a thing as East Tualatin versus West Tualatin. I mean, we are one city. We need to be dealt with as one city. I mean, we have enough challenges as a municipality, given the constraints of I-205 and I-5 and, some of the ways that geography has been handed to us. To have to deal with the city in two different districts is just ludicrous. And we'll really look to your leadership to help bring us together as we should be. So I wanted to strongly reiterate that. And then also, I feel the frustration of all of the other councilors, as well as, our parks leadership and parks department, where we so actively seek DEI and community input, and then we're not able to act on it. And I almost feel like Metro needs to be able to pull in that sort of feedback prior to putting together the wording for the levy or the bond measures, so that all these separate communities and community voices that we're hearing have a chance to have input at the beginning of the process, before it goes out to a bond or before it goes, where the levy is written, so that the things that they want can be addressed right off the top, so that we're not trying after the fact to wedge what they want and what their priorities into something that was already sort of pre-written and pre-decided, because I just feel like we've got tail wagging the dog, and there's nothing more frustrating than having the right area, the right community, perfectly clear volumes of community input and not being able to act. It's just nuts. So, I would just say if we could please get, more specific input at the very, very start of the process, we might come up with a better recipe at the end. So thank you. That was.
I appreciate those comments, and we'll work hard to make sure that this miscommunication does not happen in the future. And I really appreciate the closeness with which Tualatin Parks and Juan Carlos and Antonia and their team are working. They seem to be working in a practical sense to resolve issues and to work out good solutions that are good for Tualatin and utilize the money effectively. Like I said, I wasn't here when the original bond issue was written, but we'll work to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we have immense confidence in in Ross and his team, and he does a fantastic job for us. And I know that if anybody can stay close with Metro and find solutions for some of these challenges, we know Ross and his team is going to be the one who's going to do it for us. But yeah, we would like to make their job easier by, getting some of these points clarified at the top of the process. So thank you, Councillor. I appreciate you talking with us about this today and taking your time. Thank you.
Thank you all for your questions. Very useful. And thank you, Mayor. And there was a nice article in the local Tualatin paper about you, as well as about the history of the native tribes. I just noticed that last night. So congratulations all.
Thank you. I just want to thank you again for coming, and Juan Carlos and Antonia, thank you for coming. We went very long with you, but it was very informative, and we appreciate you meeting with us quarterly and giving your updates. Even though we get tough on you, we do appreciate the Q&A here.
I appreciate it too. I learned more than probably you do.
All right. Well, have a good and safe evening, the three of you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks again.
All right. So moving on, those were the two presentations for work session tonight. So let's go ahead and review our city council agenda. We only have one consent item. Any questions or issues with it? All right. I don't believe we have any proclamations, so no one to pick for proclamations. I think it's Cindy's turn for the Pledge of Allegiance. Am I right? All right. And with that, I think now we can go ahead and do our roundtable. We'll start with Councillor Sacco.
I don't have anything for this meeting. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Hillier.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the same things you did, so I think, or at least the two things I did attend, you were there. So I'll let you report on those. So thank you.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one. Well, I have two. I will. I'm not sure if anyone else saw that report from Washington County about the Basalt Creek extension. And so what I'll do is I'll forward it to everybody. And then I don't know how come I'm on the mailing list. Probably because I've talked a lot about this. So I just want you to know, just for context, not to push my ideas, but just so that everyone knows what's going on with that. And then I want to really acknowledge, I was out with the Tualatin Sustainability Network at an event that we partnered with the city of Tualatin on November 6th to do a Hug a Street litter blitz. And I have a little report from Jackie Cohen, who did such a great job helping organize. And we had 75 volunteers out in the sun, and then it was rain, and then it was hail, and then it was rain, and then it was sun. And luckily we had donations from Marnazi Starbucks, so everybody could warm up after they got back. And we picked up all these different paths to keep it safe in the radius of Community Park. And we were joined by Tualatin Rotary, Tigard High School Service Club, the Boy Scouts, Tualatin High School, and the community. And we picked up 12 yards of trash. There were 3 trucks full of trash that we picked up, and that included mattresses, parts of a recliner, and a hot tub filter. And we also wanted to thank the city staff, Tom Scott, Will Alloway, Sean Cowley, Tom Steiger, and Bert Offheiser for their help in, taking it all away. We did one on Earth Day when we kicked off this little organization, and we didn't have the trucks helping pull it all. So we dragged these bags back to the park, and to have the trucks and the staff there helping pick up was such a great experience. So it doesn't sound like fun picking up trash in the rain, but somehow it really turns into something positive that we could do safe in the community and give back. So I just want to thank everybody involved in that, especially the city's help. And I didn't have any other city committees, and some of the upcoming ones are canceled. So it's pretty light right now. The PAB meeting is forwarded to the 18th because of Veterans Day. And speaking of which, I just want to say happy Veterans Day to all the veterans, and to remember our veterans on November 11th. And thank you, Mayor, too, for your service.
Councilor Pratt.
Well, I did the Hug a Park Glare Blitz too, and it actually was very fun, even though it was hail. And I want to thank Jackie for having the little grabbers, because some of us don't bend over as well as we used to. And the one thing I learned there that I thought was really great is that the Tualatin Rotary has for many, many years been picking up litter along Tualatin Sherwood all the way up to Cypole. So I thought that was a really great thing to learn about. Then I'll let Mayor talk mostly about, we went on the 26th of October to the Bus on Shoulder Smart thing on the windiest day ever. And the only thing I want to say is that we got a really great opportunity to ride in a bus with former Tualatin staffer Garrett Pryor, who's now in the ODOT tolling project, and good naturedly give him a piece of our mind. So that was nice. And then the last thing was the C4 meeting, and our last meeting was focused totally on housing. In Clackamas County, I think they're gonna go forward with a $4.4 million loan. They said the Board of Commissioners actually put $2.2 million of their ARPA funds for the like motel, hotel, housing, and placement of services at that level, but they're still not going to do anything till that IGA is signed and move forward. And they've got a lot of people frustrated, including I think some of their staff, but they're just saying they were arguing that they're different than the other 2 counties, so they don't have the need to move forward, and they're being fiscally conservative. That's all I have.
Councilor Reyes.
No meetings for this representing the city, sorry.
All right.
But I did want to bring this up because I'm not sure, I didn't want to wait till next year. So you mentioned proclamations, Mayor, and I do want to next year, with the help of the city and those who can join me on this, to have a proclamation for Hispanic Heritage Month. And I think that I want to be able to do that. And for some reason, I didn't capture the process. And now that I know the process, I want to see if all of you want to join me on having a Hispanic Heritage Month proclamation every year from September 15th through October 15th. So that's what I want to make sure it's out there and bring it up this time. So thank you. Okay. That's all.
Sounds good. Council President Grimes.
I have no reports to share.
All right.
At this point.
All right. Got a few things. As Councilor Pratt said, myself, Councilor Pratt, and City Manager Cheryl Lambos were at the kickoff of the SMART / ODOT Bus and Shoulder events on the 26th. So long and short of that is that a 2-mile stretch between the smart park, smart facility and our park and ride. Smart buses will have the ability to ride on the shoulder when traffic dips below 35 miles an hour. So they can make those connections quicker than the folks who are stuck in traffic. It is a pilot project over the next year or so to see how well it works, hoping that it does work so well that they roll this out to 205, and then 205 will have bus and shoulder between Tualatin all the way to Clackamas Town Center, which would be very cool. On the 27th, I attended the West Economic Alliance board meeting, where the folks who are behind the preschool, universal preschool initiative for Washington County gave their presentation again, and looking for feedback from the business community on those things they would want to be looking for if they were to put a bond measure out to pay for the preschool in a manner similar than Multnomah County is providing those services. On the 28th, I was at the Key Leaders Breakfast with Councillor Hillia that was sponsored by the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce. It was terrific. The presenter made economics easy and made it entertaining. John Mitchell was from Idaho, explained a lot of things that were going on at the county level, the city level, state level, and the whole across the country. And it was very enlightening, and I'm very pleased that I went. Had a good showing. It was the first time I'd seen a lot of people in person. First time I'd seen Chair Harrington in about a year and a half in person. She attended, as well as a lot of other electeds that I invited. Later that day, I had the Greater Portland Inc. Small Cities Consortium. They did a presentation from the Regional Disaster Preparedness Office. I think we've gotten that presentation before on how there's a multi-jurisdictional regional preparedness office that is doing planning and doing exercises constantly on how to react to any kind of serious emergency in the area. It's not just about earthquakes. Now it's about fires. It's about ice storms. They've expanded those things that they're going to be prepared for. So it was a really good presentation. On the 30th, I had a terrific time at Tualatin Together, again with Councillor Hillier, on their Wicked Wellness Costume Fun Run. The kids were adorable, especially the little bunny preschooler who ran the course. Watching this little preschooler in her bunny outfit run the course not once but twice was super entertaining. Cindy has a great team of teen volunteers who are very enthusiastic. Lesson learned is don't give a teenager the megaphone again. He enjoyed that thing, but it was a lot of fun judging the costumes and watching the races. The River Park CIO meeting was held on the 3rd. I attended that. Went very well. Thank you, Megan, for facilitating it. What was interesting is the president of the CIO is very strict on time, and when your 5 minutes is up, your 5 minutes is up. Which several of us learned our lessons that don't try to push beyond 5 minutes because you will get cut off, because she had a lot to cover. So I very much appreciate her doing it, and the people who were on the board. On the 5th, I had my prep call just last Friday with the Washington County Coordinating Committee on what we're going to be presenting here at the full board or full committee coming up. And finally, spent Saturday in downtown Portland. It was the Metro Mayor's Consortium Fall Retreat. We met at the EcoTrust building in the Pearl. They have a rather large meeting facility upstairs. So we were all socially distanced, masked, and did all that fun stuff where we approved our bylaw changes. A new chair and vice chair were elected for next year. So Mayor Snyder will be the chair of the Metro Mayor's Consortium next year, and Mayor Beatty will be his vice chair. We worked on our 2022-2023 legislative agenda, and finally reviewed and responded to a lobbying proposal for continuing services on behalf of the consortium to lobby in Salem. And that's all I have. Is pretty busy. So anything else? Councillor Hillier.
Other than, again, to say thank you to the mayor for putting up with us. It was very fun. But also, I'd like to encourage community members that might be listening. Our Tualatin Timberwolves football team is doing very well. They're in the second round of the playoffs now. And I would encourage you this Friday. I know there's no school Thursday or Friday, but encourage you to attend the football game. Bring your hungry tummy. There'll be concessions and all sorts of stuff. So root on the Wolves.
Thanks, Councillor Hillier. Anything else?
Is that at home, Councillor Hillier? At the high school?
Oh, yes. We'll be home until we face West Lynn. So there's kind of some funny things in the bracket, but we are for sure home. 7 p.m. kickoff, 6 p.m. food opens.
Right.
And then the band, because the band starts, I think, at 6:45. So it's very fun.
Yeah. And I was talking to my neighbor whose son's on a football team. I guess there's different rules because it's an OSAA event. So ticketing and everything is a little bit different than folks are used to. So be prepared that you have to maybe go through a different process to get into the game. Did you have your hand up, Sherlyn?
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I'm going to ask Megan if she can come on camera, but just reminder of November 20th, the Garden Corner Curves celebration is happening. When you mentioned the band, Councillor Hillier, it reminded me, because we're going to have the marching band, we're going to close the street and have a little parade. And Megan, what time is it?
9:30 to noon.
9:30 to noon on the 20th. And you guys will get an invitation, I believe. But anyway, put it on your calendars. So.
Yeah. And then isn't the Councilor Pratt, isn't your CAO meeting on isn't it the 13th?
It got moved to the 16th, but
Got moved
yes.
to the 16th? Okay. I know you're the person who'll be under the 5-minute clock that day. All right. Anything else? All right. Looks like we got a little extra time here, so we'll meet you all back here at 7 o'clock. We got about 13 minutes or so to fill up our water bottles and stuff like that. So we'll see you back here in about 13 minutes.